Hey again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Today I'm here to talk to you about the nursery business and how in the nursery business there's no free ride, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's definitely no such thing as a free plant. Even though people talk about propagating and getting free plants, and there's videos all over YouTube talking about how you can do that, I always fact check that in my head. I know that every plant I deal with costs me time, it costs me space, it costs me watering, it costs me the opportunity to grow something else. And if you're just a casual grower, a hobbyist, you can probably get past the point where you have to account for every bit of soil you use, all the time you spend watering, all those little things. It's not such a big deal. But I assure you that when you get into the business end of it and you have to multiply that by larger crops over a longer length of time, that those free plants can end up being very costly. And I can say with some experience under my belt now that free plants and plants that have been quite cheap to begin with have been some of my most costly mistakes. So let me go through that with you today. So the first example I'm going to use here comes directly from YouTube, and I use this as a great way to illustrate the point that nothing is free. And what they're talking about in these videos is how to take an apple seed and turn that into an apple tree for free. So I start to think about what you put into that. It's going to take weeks or up to months to germinate that seed. You're going to have that in a pot. You're going to be taking care of it and watering it. That's your time. Not significant, but it's your time anyway. Then if it germinates and you pot it up into a larger pot, so because you don't want to put it directly into the ground, then you're taking care of a 1 gallon pot or some similar pot for a length of time. Then once it goes into the ground, it starts growing. Okay, let's talk time here, because taking an apple tree from seed can take from 7 to 10 years to bear fruit. Now, I've heard stories about apples producing sooner than that, but I wouldn't count on it. So you have to think on the pessimistic side. It could be 7 to 10 years before you know whether this was worth your time and space. Let's talk about that. Because it's not a grafted apple tree, because it's growing on its own roots, it's probably going to grow quite large. Most standard apple trees on their own roots grow up to 30 feet tall and wide. So that's a lot of space that you're dedicating to this free apple tree. And now, speaking of things that are unexpected, how do you know what you're going to get for the fruit? Because there's every chance in the world that an open pollinated apple tree that you got that apple from could have been pollinated by a crab apple. You could be getting small apples, you could be getting sour apples, or they could be just fine. And you won't know. You won't know that for some number of years until after you've planted this. So this brings into mind the concept of opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost in this case, or the simplest comparison would be, what could you have grown instead of that apple tree? Well, you could have bought an apple tree online for either $24 or $30 that is grafted onto a dwarf rootstock, that you're going to get the apple that you want, that you've chosen in advance, and you're going to get the fruit years sooner. So you start weighing those two things and say, boy, over here, I've spent all this time, I've spent all of this personal attention to this seedling that's grown for 7 or 10 years. I'm still getting a tree that is larger than I wanted, has fruits that I don't know if they're any good, or I can spend $24, and yeah, $24 is money, but you're getting what you want. And so if you want to emphasize this point and apply it to the nursery business, just go ahead and ask any commercial grower of fruit trees why they don't just go to the grocery store and buy a bag of apples and start their crop of apple trees that way. And the answer will be basically the same. They don't know what they're going to get. It's not worth it to put that much time into that number of seedlings for a product in the end, a tree that nobody's going to want to buy because they're unsure what they're getting. And for my second example, I brought along something from my own greenhouse here. I propagate roses by cuttings, and even though you could say, well, these cuttings are free, they came from a plant in my garden, I took cuttings, and I didn't have to pay anything directly to get these. But I did have to pay. I have the mother plant, which I paid for. I've been maintaining the mother plant for years. I've taken these cuttings off of it. That cost me time, rooting hormone. I had to put them on my misting bench, and that took time and space off of my misting bench that I could have been spending on other plants. And now it's growing in this. So now that these are well rooted into a small nursery pot, this is a 4-inch pot. I've got roots at the bottom of the pot there. These are going to overwinter in my greenhouse. And come spring, I'm going to separate these out and I'm going to pot them into a gallon pot. So there's more soil, more plastic, and more time on the floor of my nursery. And all the way through this, I'm fertilizing and watering. So I say, that's a free plant that I have a pretty good idea that it's cost me some money. And I wouldn't grow a plant for 1 year or 2 years and then just say, yeah, I got it for free. I would assume that every year I grow this, I'm applying, even if I'm not doing a direct accounting of the soil and fertilizer, I'm applying a certain cost to that to compensate me for my time and the efforts in the growing space. Now, please don't get me wrong, I actually think that the hobby of propagation is outstanding and so necessary, especially in trying to maintain and preserve those uncommon and rare varieties of plants that are falling out of the trade. And I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think it was worth my own time. I just want you to be cautious of the idea that this is entirely free and that miscalculation of no cost can bear real costs in your business. So one of the things I did, and this is an example from my own experience, is that early on I took cuttings of all sorts of shrubs around my yard, some of the easy ones to root, some of the hard ones to root. And one of the easiest ones to root I found was this one here, which is out of leaf now, but it is a gooseberry plant, a red gooseberry plant that I was propagating from the landscape. And early on in my business, I found this such an easy thing to propagate. I guess I lost track of how many I actually had taken cuttings of. And so by the time I potted up the following spring, I had like 70 of these things. Now, in the scale of my business, just selling small scale through the farmer's market and locally, that's probably 3 or 4 years supply. I just don't sell them every week. They have a bit of a tart taste to them, which I love, but not every customer loves the same way. So upon finding that and knowing that these things were filling their pots, they were going to be root bound, I was going to have to either up pot them or try to maintain them with more and more difficulty as they fill that pot with roots, I eventually just decided to compost a little over half the crop. So I brought myself down to a reasonable amount. I had 30 on hand after that. I took the next couple of years selling those out. But for me, again, the lesson was clear. Choosing to look at those as free had led me to propagate way too many of them, and free and easy doesn't always end up being your best deal. Okay, back in the main greenhouse here, I want to show you an example of a very free plant. There's nothing more free than something you've already paid for. This plant here is Carryover. I grew it for this year's growing season and it just didn't sell. So great, free plant. I can take this, I put it into a gallon-sized pot, I can pot it up for next year and sell it for more money. But not so fast. You see, you have to think. Even that step has its own opportunity cost. I could grow something else in that same pot, that same soil, that might be more likely to sell than this here. In fact, you have to ask the question, well, if it didn't sell in the first year, what makes you so sure that you can sell it in the second year? Is it going to show better? Or was there something you did wrong the first year that you can correct? Maybe my picture tag wasn't so attractive. So that's the thinking on this, is don't just assume that because you have it and because it's free and because it's an easy way to put it into a larger pot that it's going to make you money. On this one here, I actually have about 36 of these. And my plan right now is to probably do about a dozen into larger pots, and the rest I will throw away. And throwing them away is probably the easiest and most effective and best way for me to cut my losses on this crop so that I don't end up carrying something too long, its condition deteriorates, I'm fertilizing, I'm pruning, I'm spending time on a crop. I could just seed something brand new and have a better chance of selling it, and that's probably the better financial decision. So I have one final example of opportunity cost to go with here, and it has to do with planting seeds. So we're all familiar with the regular garden variety of black-eyed Susan, also known by its botanical name Rudbeckia hirta. And if you've grown these in your garden, you know that they are absolutely easy to collect seeds from, start seeds from. Hey, they start themselves. So you can grow those for the farmer's market, you can grow those for sale, but the problem with them is they are a little bit spindly. They tend to be a little bit small flowered, a little bit hard to look good in a pot. So the next step up from that, and that's free, cheaply you can purchase these seeds here. Now these seeds are Rudbeckia hirta, same species, but it's a variety called Indian Summer, and you can purchase these relatively cheaply. This is won an award of garden merit. it's stockier, it's got larger flowers. It just looks better in a pot. And I found that when I've grown these, people have no hesitation buying them in the pot because they look so good. And last year I went and I found a third variety of Rudbeckia hirta, a variety called Rudbeckia Sahara. And this one has muted shades of pink, orange, red. It's just gorgeous and it's compact. And when I tried to sell those, they sold through like nothing. People just loved them. So you have a choice. You can go for free seeds, the wild Rudbeckia hirta, and you might sell them if people feel sorry for you. You can go with Indian Summer or some other better, bigger flowered cultivar that's not too expensive. It's relatively cheap, and you can have a better looking plant. Or you can go for something that's even more money, a little more expensive, but you can charge more money for it and you can sell it through really, really well. Those are your opportunity costs. So it isn't always simply a matter of go for what's cheap, go for what's free, because sometimes free costs you more. Thanks so much for watching today. If you have any questions about this or any discussion on nursery selling strategies or all that, that's my bag, so drop it below the video.